If you make just one of these mistakes tonight, your brain may never fully recover, and most people over 50 make at least three of them without even knowing it. I know that sounds alarming, but please stay with me for a moment because what I'm about to reveal could genuinely change the trajectory of your cognitive health. Tonight, I'm going to expose the silent mistakes that happen in your bedroom, the ones that don't cause immediate symptoms, don't trigger obvious warnings, and don't offer second chances. And more importantly, I'll show you how to correct them before you turn off the lights. Let me start with a story that still haunts me. A woman in her early 70s came to see me for what seemed like a routine cognitive assessment. She was sharp, still managing her finances, still volunteering at her church, and she described herself as mentally fit for her age. Her memory was slightly fuzzy around the edges, but nothing that seemed concerning. When I asked her about her sleep environment, she laughed and said, "It's just a bedroom. What does that have to do with anything?" That dismissal right there, that assumption is more dangerous than most people understand. 6 months later, her daughter called me in tears. Her mother could no longer recognize familiar faces. She'd forgotten how to use basic household items. The decline had been swift and devastating. When I reviewed her case again, the pattern became crystal clear. Every night, she had been unknowingly damaging her brain in ways that seemed completely harmless. Here's the truth that doctors don't emphasize enough. Your brain is not protected while you sleep. In fact, for many people over 55, nighttime is when the brain faces its most insidious threats. Not the dramatic kind you'd notice immediately, but the subtle kind, the kind that accumulates slowly, silently, while you're completely unaware. Temperature regulation shifts, oxygen delivery changes, toxin clearance slows, and small, seemingly innocent bedroom habits can become cognitively catastrophic when they compound night after night in the darkness. I'm Dr. Linda Harrison, and for over 2 decades, I've studied what happens to the brain during sleep. I've analyzed thousands of cases involving nighttime cognitive decline, sleep-related dementia progression, and neurological deterioration that only manifests during the overnight hours. And what I can tell you with absolute confidence is this: most of these cases are not inevitable. They are the result of preventable mistakes, mistakes people have no idea they're making. The first one is so widespread, and almost everyone thinks they're making a smart choice. The first mistake is sleeping in a room that's too warm. Most people, especially seniors, keep their bedrooms cozy and warm because they associate warmth with comfort. That seems reasonable. It feels nurturing. But inside your brain, something very different is unfolding. When your bedroom temperature is too high, your brain cannot properly cool itself during sleep. That interferes with the brain's natural cleaning process, something called the glymphatic system. This system removes toxic proteins and cellular waste that accumulate during the day, including the very proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. During the night, especially during deep sleep phases, your brain needs to be slightly cooler than your body's normal temperature. That cooling triggers the waste removal process. But when your room is too warm, this process is severely impaired. Toxic buildup increases. Inflammation rises. And over months and years, cognitive function deteriorates. I've had patients tell me they keep their bedroom at 75 or even 78 degrees Fahrenheit because anything cooler feels uncomfortable. What they don't understand is that they may be slowly poisoning their brain with their own cellular waste. This doesn't mean you should freeze at night, but keeping your bedroom excessively warm, especially above 70 degrees, is a silent cognitive threat. The ideal range for brain health during sleep is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. It may take a few nights to adjust, but the difference in how your brain cleanses itself is profound. But here's the critical part. Temperature control alone won't protect you if you're making the second mistake, which has to do with what you're breathing all night. The second mistake is sleeping in a room with poor air quality and inadequate oxygen flow. Stale air feels harmless. Closed windows seem cozy. For years, many people have slept in sealed bedrooms without giving it a second thought. But as we age, the brain's sensitivity to oxygen levels becomes more acute. When you sleep in a poorly ventilated room, carbon dioxide builds up. Oxygen levels gradually drop. Dust particles, mold spores, and chemical off-gassing from furniture and carpets accumulate in the air you breathe for 8 hours straight. For people with even mild respiratory issues, allergies, or undiagnosed breathing problems, this can be devastating to brain health. Let me ask you something important. Have you ever woken up in the morning with brain fog that takes hours to clear or felt mentally sluggish despite sleeping a full night? That's not just aging, that's not normal fatigue, that's your brain suffering from overnight oxygen deprivation. I once had a patient who insisted her bedroom felt stuffy every morning. When I asked if she ever opened a window or used air purification, she said she worried about outside noise and temperature changes. Her brain had been signaling distress for years, but she'd been ignoring it. Fresh air circulation, even a crack in the window or a quality air purifier, can dramatically improve overnight brain oxygenation. You don't need industrial ventilation systems. You don't need to sleep in the cold. Even modest improvements in air quality can help your brain perform its essential overnight repair functions. But even perfect air won't save you if you're making the third mistake, which is one of the most common and least recognized dangers of all. The third mistake is exposing your brain to light pollution while you sleep. Artificial light seems innocent. Night lights, charging devices, digital clocks, street lights through thin curtains, all of it feels normal in our modern world. But your brain has ancient mechanisms that depend on complete darkness to function properly. Light exposure during sleep, even small amounts, disrupts your circadian rhythm and suppresses melatonin production. Melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone, it's also a powerful antioxidant that protects brain cells from damage. When melatonin production is suppressed night after night, your brain loses one of its most important protective mechanisms. I've reviewed numerous studies showing that people who sleep in rooms with even minimal light exposure have measurably higher rates of cognitive decline, depression, and neurodegenerative disease. The most insidious part is that this damage accumulates silently. You don't feel it happening. Your sleep might even seem normal, but your brain chemistry is being fundamentally altered. People often tell me, "I've always slept with a nightlight. I can't change now." But sometimes a lifetime habit is exactly what needs to change. This risk is even higher if you use electronic devices near your bed, leave televisions on, or have bright alarm clocks facing you. This is why it's so important to ask a very specific question when it comes to your sleep environment. Not just, can I sleep this way? But is this environment allowing my brain to fully regenerate? If the answer isn't clear, that's a warning sign. But light isn't the only environmental factor people underestimate at night. The fourth mistake has to do with chemical exposure that happens while you're unconscious. The fourth mistake is surrounding yourself with toxins you've learned to ignore. Humans are remarkably good at adaptation. We become nose blind to chemical smells. We accept that new furniture off gases, that air fresheners create a pleasant environment, that cleaning products leave a fresh scent. But your brain doesn't adapt the way your senses do. It absorbs and accumulates until it can't anymore. Volatile organic compounds from mattresses, flame retardants in bedding, fragrance chemicals in detergents and plug-ins, mold growing in hidden corners, all of these release substances that you breathe directly into your lungs and bloodstream while you sleep. One of the most common and dangerous sources of overnight toxin exposure is your mattress and pillows. Many contain chemicals that were never tested for long-term neurological safety. Over time, these chemicals can contribute to inflammation, oxidative stress, and brain cell damage. What makes this so dangerous is that most people have no idea it's happening. You don't smell anything unusual after the first few weeks. You don't feel sick, but your brain is being exposed to neurotoxic compounds for 8 hours every single night. I once asked a patient why she never considered what might be in her bedroom products. She looked surprised and said she assumed anything sold in stores must be safe. It wasn't. Once she switched to organic, non-toxic bedding and removed synthetic air fresheners, her morning mental clarity improved noticeably. Ignoring chemical exposure doesn't make you uninformed. It makes you vulnerable. And all of this brings us to the final mistake, the one that connects everything together and often determines whether your brain truly recovers during sleep. But before we get there, let me say this clearly. None of these mistakes feel dangerous in the moment. That's exactly why they're so destructive. They don't hurt, they don't alarm you, they simply create conditions where brain degeneration happens faster than it should. And what comes next, the final mistake, is something almost everyone overlooks, especially in those quiet hours before bed. Now we come to the final mistake, and in many ways, this is the one that determines whether all the others become catastrophic or manageable. Because even if you control temperature, purify air, eliminate light, and reduce toxins, there's still one thing that can silently undermine all of that effort. And it's something most people believe they have no control over. The fifth mistake is going to sleep with an electrically chaotic environment. Most people think of electricity as a convenience issue, charging phones, running devices, powering electronics. But what very few people understand is that electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, affect brain function in measurable ways, especially during sleep when your brain is most vulnerable. If you sleep next to charging devices, keep your phone on your nightstand, have Wi-Fi routers in or near your bedroom, or surround yourself with electrical equipment, your brain is being exposed to electromagnetic frequencies all night long. Research increasingly shows that EMF exposure can disrupt brainwave patterns, interfere with deep sleep stages, increase oxidative stress in brain tissue, and potentially contribute to long-term neurological dysfunction. I've seen this pattern repeatedly. Patients with unexplained cognitive symptoms during the day, but when we examine their sleep environment, it's surrounded by electrical devices operating within feet of their head for 8 hours every night. One patient told me, "But I need my phone nearby in case of emergency." That's exactly the rationalization that keeps people at risk. Your brain is designed to operate in a very specific electrical environment. That's how neurons communicate. When you introduce artificial electromagnetic fields, especially during the vulnerable state of sleep, you're potentially disrupting the very foundation of cognitive function. This is why brain fog, memory problems, and concentration issues are increasingly common even among people who seem to do everything else right. From the brain's perspective, sleeping in an electromagnetic soup is like trying to have a conversation in a room full of static noise. The signal gets distorted. Now, here's the encouraging news, and this is vital. This mistake is one of the simplest to address, and it doesn't require major expense, complicated changes, or dramatic lifestyle upheaval. It requires awareness. Awareness that your bedroom should be an electrical sanctuary, not a charging station. A simple rule: keep all electronic devices at least 6 feet from your head while you sleep can make a remarkable difference in overnight brain recovery. Turn off Wi-Fi routers at night, or at least move them far from sleeping areas. Use battery-powered alarm clocks instead of plug-in digital ones. Charge phones in another room. If you absolutely must have devices nearby, put them in airplane mode. When you reduce electromagnetic exposure during sleep, your brain's natural electrical patterns can function without interference. That's not pseudoscience. That's basic physics applied to neurobiology. I often tell patients to think of their bedroom as a recovery chamber, not a tech hub. Your brain needs 8 hours of electrical quiet to properly heal and consolidate memories. Now, let's step back and see the complete picture, because this is where everything converges. None of the 5 mistakes we've discussed are dramatic individually. That's precisely what makes them so dangerous. They don't feel like threats, they feel like normal modern life. Warm rooms, closed windows, night lights, scented products, charging phones, each one quietly increases overnight brain stress. And when several of them occur simultaneously, night after night, year after year, the brain eventually reaches a tipping point. The people who experience rapid cognitive decline are rarely careless. They're not ignoring obvious warning signs. They're simply living the way everyone around them lives. And that's why awareness is so powerful, because once you understand what threatens your brain during sleep, you can implement small changes that yield enormous protective benefits. So, let's make this actionable tonight. Before you go to bed, do 5 simple things. Lower your bedroom temperature to somewhere between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, even if it feels slightly cool at first. Open a window slightly or turn on an air purifier to ensure fresh oxygen flow throughout the night. Make your room as dark as possible, covering all light sources, removing electronics with LED displays, or using blackout curtains. Remove or reduce chemical sources, switch to natural cleaning products, consider organic bedding, and eliminate synthetic fragrances. And finally, create an electronic-free zone around your bed, keeping all devices at least 6 feet away and turning off Wi-Fi when possible. These are not extreme measures. They are evidence-based corrections, and they matter because sleep is not passive. Sleep is active brain restoration. Every night, your brain is working to clear toxins, repair damage, and consolidate everything you learned that day. The goal is not to make that process harder than it already is. I want to share one final thought with you, and it's something I wish more people grasped sooner. When brain damage occurs during sleep, there are no immediate symptoms. There's no pain signal. That's why prevention matters infinitely more than treatment. The brain doesn't announce when it's been compromised. You simply notice months or years later that something isn't quite right anymore. But the opposite is equally true. When you protect your brain properly at night, the benefits compound. Better sleep improves memory, enhances mental clarity, reduces inflammation, and builds cognitive resilience. Nighttime brain care isn't separate from brain health. It's the cornerstone of it. So here's my question for you, and this is crucial. Which one of these mistakes have you been making without realizing it? Not which one frightens you most, but which one sounds uncomfortably familiar. Take a moment and be honest with yourself. If this information made you reconsider how you sleep tonight, I want you to do one more thing. Share it with someone you love, a partner, a parent, a friend, because the most damaging brain mistakes don't happen in doctors' offices. They happen silently in bedrooms while we sleep. And sometimes awareness alone is enough to protect a mind.